Welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin B., your host and a child of an all-powerful, perfectly loving God and an addict living in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. Rico 12 is an open to all addictions and afflictions organization dedicated to exploring the common threads of the differing manifestations of alcoholism, sharing tools and offering hope from those walking a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and locations to learn from and support one another. Our speakers come from various fellowships and experiences demonstrating the universal principles of recovery. Rico 12 is not allied or affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. This is Rico 12 meeting number 414. Thank you for joining us live or on the recording later. Today's speaker is Luke H., who has spoken once before on Rico 12, and you can find that in any of the other previous recordings on the Rico 12 podcast. We're continuing our 12-week series on each of the 12 steps of recovery this week. And Luke will proceed with step 4 today, and I look forward to diving into this conversation here in a few minutes. But first, a few quick announcements and thoughts. Rico 12 offers a variety of recovery resources, including podcasts and social media communities. To learn more and explore more, visit rico12.com. That's RECO12, like recovery, 12step.com, or check the chat and show notes for links. We're always looking for speakers to share on Rico 12. And this 12-week series is now full. Thank you all who have stepped up and said, yeah, I want to speak on that step. But we will be needing more speakers starting in May and moving forward. So if your higher power is moving you to share on a recovery topic of your own choice, please consider reaching out to me and we'll get things lined up. You can do that through email. I'll put email address in the chat, but it's rico12pod@gmail.com. You can also do that through the website that I mentioned earlier. We are self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue this mission, and this message. For information on how to do that, I'll post things in the chat, in the show notes. Thank you very much this week to Kelly and Lillian for your generous donations. Your support, both financially and by word of mouth, truly makes a difference in helping us share these messages of hope and recovery. Now, some guest introduction here. Each week, we receive light and inspiration from our speakers. Their experience brings hope, meaning, worth, and growth to us as listeners. And now I'm going to welcome Luke H. Here's just a little bit about him, and I love how his intro is very simple. Luke is a garden variety sexaholic, sober for 11 years. And Luke's today, he's going to share his experience, strength, and hope around step 4. Take it away, Luke. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Justin. Appreciate that. And, just to give a little bit of background, I was asked by Justin if I wanted to join this series on the steps, and if I did, what step I would like to speak on. And normally I'm really excited to talk about step 3 or step 10 and 11 or 12. Those are probably my favorites to talk about. And I thought, when I prayed about it, I was like, what I found over the years is that people really suffer a lot. I've seen a lot of people really suffer because of the way that they approach step 4, and we have all these jokes about it. Oh my God, step 4, it took me 6 months. I was on it for 4 years, and it was the worst time of my life. And, oh yeah, step 4, it's just so terrible. It gets a really bad rap. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way that people do it, that the messages that we get. Of course, I think there can be a factor of just, dragging our heels and not wanting to face ourselves. There's certainly an element of that. But to the best of my ability as a sponsor, as somebody who's passionate about carrying the message, I try to really untangle things for people and give them the best understanding that I have today about what we're doing and how to go about it in an effective way. And so for step 4, for me, this really begins with step 3. And when you read the big book, and the big book is my instruction manual, so I'm going to be referring to it a lot today. In the book, step 3 flows into step 4 really effortlessly, right? They talk about how selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our troubles. And they say that, this is really what we need to deal with. The whole plot of the 12 steps is about getting out of self, getting out of selfishness. On page 62, it says, above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us, right? This is the plot. This is the point. This is the solution. all the steps should be focused on getting us to that point, right? And what happens is it's sort of like pouring water or coffee out of a cup, you know? So when you pour out the selfishness, what's left is God, is the air, right? And so effectively, this is the process that we're going through in the steps. And that really begins in earnest in step 4. So with that background, we move into step 4, and they say on, let's see, on page, find it here, on page 64, it says, being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. So in step 4, what we're doing is we're looking at the common manifestations of selfishness. So what comes from living selfishly and self-centeredly, like living by self-propulsion, being the actor who's trying to be the director, right? Playing God. These are all, synonyms for the same experience. So it's this way of approaching life where I've determined how things need to go, how people need to behave, how I need to be treated, and then I'm holding up this blueprint or script against the world, and I'm saying, well, that's wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong, you're not acting right, this isn't how it's supposed to be. And the result of that is that I'm disturbed, I'm unhappy, I'm pissed off, I'm resentful, I'm irritated, I'm afraid, I'm in conflict, right? And so this experience is what they call the bondage of self, right? In the 3rd step prayer, it says, relieve me of this bondage of self, So, so what we're looking at in step 4 is what happens when we live that way. When this is my strategy for having a good life, trying to get life arranged the way I think I need it, trying to get the things that I think I need to be okay, what happens? Well, they say the first thing is we get resentful, right? Because guess what? Things don't go my way. And when things don't go my way, I get angry. And then when I hold on to it, hold grudges, I get resentful, right? And they say that we need to deal with these things because this is what blocks me off from God, right? This is what blocks me off from a higher power. And so it says at the top of 64, though our decision, our 3rd step decision, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once, like immediately, followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us from God, blocking us from an experience of God, a relationship with God, right? I cannot experience God and have an effective relationship with God that's full of power, which I need to be free, and while I am still playing God, right? That just doesn't work. So that's what we're looking at, and that's why we're looking at it. I cannot be free of the insanity of my disease while I am still playing God, while I am in self. When I'm in self, when I'm blocked from God, that insanity is there, right? It may not be there today, may not be there tomorrow, but the guarantee of step 1 is it'll show up, right? It will happen. The time and place will come when I do it again. Whether it's drinking or lusting or whatever, the time and place will come. That's the guarantee. The only thing that I can do is get out of self, address this selfishness by first identifying it in step 4, sharing it with somebody in step 5, being ready and willing in step 6, and then asking God to remove it in step 7, and then dealing with all the things that come from living selfishly with steps 8 and 9. So one of the common issues that I see people making, and I've done it myself with the resentment inventory in particular, is they don't follow the instructions. Or they follow different instructions than what is in this book. And what I have found, I've worked the steps many different methods, probably 15 times or something in the last 12 years, and using different worksheets, different approaches, different books, literature. And what I have found is that the way that the big book suggests it is the simplest, and it's also the most effective. And to me, that's really a winning combination. So part of that really begins with reading what it says on page 65, right? On page 65, it says, "We were usually as definite as this example." So what they're saying is my inventory should look like this, right? That's what those words mean if you just take them at face value, right? And I think Bill was a smart guy. He meant what he said. He meant what he wrote. He was very particular about the words that he used, and he thought about it quite a bit. And so part of what becomes apparent when we look at this example is how brief he is in this part of the inventory, right? If you look at this guy, I like to use the example of his wife, right? So you look at his wife, the last example on page 65. "My wife, the cause of his resentment, misunderstands and nags, likes brown, wants house put in her name." I mean, that's it. Your wife, like she's not done anything else. And it's like, okay, what they're saying here is just a teaspoon of resentment, because this is all just resentment. This is just a story I'm telling myself about how this person is screwing me over and what they're doing to piss me off, right? This is just more of the same stuff that's been blocking me and killing me, right? It's like, I don't need more of that. It's just enough here to get the name down oh yeah, I got a resentment here. So he's got 11 words, 3 sentences, right? It's super brief. And so one of the primary mistakes I see people making is they write a lot in column 2. Every resentment they can imagine, everything that's ever happened, everything this person has ever done, right? Paragraphs, pages and pages. And they get more and more miserable. They get more and more in self. And it's awful, right? It is an awful experience to do that because they don't understand what the point is. The point is not to get more into self and dwell more on what we think people are doing to harm us and wrong us, whether it's real or fancied, right? Real or imagined. The point is to see this very briefly. Yep, I got some resentment. Okay, let's move on, right? Let's move on to get to the main part here where I can actually get some freedom, which is not until the next couple pages here where we start looking at my mistake, right? Which is really the selfishness. Again, all these inventories are focused on selfishness and getting out of selfishness. So spotting it and then getting ready so that I can ask God to remove it, to remove these blockages, to get a new perspective on these people and situations, to realize that they are spiritually sick too. They are playing God. They are stuck in self. They are driven by fear. They are hurting. They are suffering. They are in the bondage of self, right? I need to make real that these things are true for other people as well as me, right? They're living on 60 to 62. And that effectively is the solution that they present us to resentment, right? Bottom of page 66, it says, "This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick." And they've told us what that is in step 3, right? They've gone to great lengths to give us an analogy, to explain it, to give examples from everybody from a minister to a thief, right? These people are all playing God. They're all in self. It's like, wait, a minister, right? A businessman, politician, reformer, yeah, all these guys are in self. They're playing God. They've got a way they think the world should be, and they're trying to hold on to it and make it happen, right? So we got to wake up to this. We got to see that this is the way everybody's living. And when we can start to get this new perspective, it can change the story that we're telling ourselves about these people and their behavior. And that's what leads to the freedom, this new understanding, right? And of course, God is a part of that process. I can't do it without God. I ask for, a new understanding, to see them as sick people, right? Spiritually sick. It's very specific. It's not like they're mentally ill or something. It's like, no, it's spiritual malady, right? It's what we have talked about in step 3 already. So really, this is where the freedom comes. And so, what I tell people is, very brief in the first 3 columns, right? Because there's no more freedom there. You're not going to get any freedom from that. And then really spend your time on the my mistake, on the identifying the selfishness, getting a new perspective on these people, on these situations. And that's where the freedom begins to come in my experience. So I know I have fairly limited time here, so I go pretty quick through this. I like to note that there are tools in each of these inventories, I don't know if anybody's ever told you this, but there's one tool in each of these inventories, in the resentment inventory and the fear inventory and the sex inventory, that we can use in all the rest of our life, right? For the rest of my life, I can use these tools, and I will never experience a situation where one of these tools is not relevant, right? They'll be useful for every single situation you ever find yourself in for the rest of your life. They are extremely powerful and they work, right? My sponsor would say over and over, Luke, everything that's in this book is in here because it works, right? It's in here because it works. It's their experience, They were having all these problems and they found a way out, right? They found a way to get freedom. And as Fred says, a way of living that solved all his problems, that's what we got here. So the tools. So in the resentment inventory, I already read it. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. So this is tool 1, right? Making real that the people who wronged me are not doing it because of me. They're not doing it. It's not personal, right? It's not about me. Any act of selfishness is not personal by definition. They are thinking about themselves. When I behave selfishly and cause harm, I wasn't thinking about the other person. That's the whole problem, right? So only an act of love is personal, because if it's real love, it means that somebody is actually thinking about me. When my wife takes time to think about what kind of gifts I would really like, for Christmas or something, and she gets me something that's really meaningful and personal, and it's like, wow, I can take that personally. She really cares about me. She really thought about this, and that's love, and it's personal, right? But selfishness is never personal, because they're not thinking about me. They're trying to make themselves feel better. They're stuck in self, and they're being driven by fear typically. So that's the first tool. The second tool is related to fear. So fear, this is, as the 12 and 12 says, it's the chief activator of our defects, right? It really has a special place in these manifestations of selfishness. Again, this is a manifestation of selfishness. It means that I am thinking about me, right? I am afraid because I am thinking about me. I have a spotlight on myself, and I'm thinking about what I want and how to get it and how I might not get it. And, oh my God, if I don't get it, I'm not going to be okay. What's going to happen? How's this going to go for me? Right? Self, me, I, right? Fear is all selfish, me thinking about me. And that's why they have it in here. And so what do they say the solution is? Well, it's one of these things that's like, it's one of the biggest problems that we have, or it leads to a lot of other problems, right? And it has the simplest solution, ironically. So what do they say? They say on page 68, bottom second to last paragraph there, we ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. So really, the solution to fear is just living out this step 3 decision, really making God my director instead of my thinking, instead of these thoughts that are coming to me in my head. I'm acting on spiritual principles and trying to live a life where I'm playing the role that God's assigned me, instead of thinking about how this is going to go for me, what I need to do to arrange it, make it happen, and so I can be okay. I'm not doing that anymore, right? How can I be helpful here, God? Part of my role after step 3 is to be a customer service agent for God, right? Everywhere I go, how can I help? What can I do for you? How is your day going, right? How can I spread some laughter, some cheers, some, some lightness, some levity, some love, kindness, it can be very simple, very little things, but all through the day, I'm okay. God's taking care of me. So what can I do for you? That's kind of the idea. So this is practically what I do in the moment when I have fear. Hey, God, please remove my fear and direct my attention to what you'd have me be. And what I found, and I'll think about this, right? I'll think about it. Like, what would God have me be? Well, God wants me to be present. God wants me to be useful. God wants me to be others focused, right? Being of service, customer service agent. So what does that look like right now? Probably doesn't mean sitting, thinking, and dwelling on myself, right? Probably means getting into action, doing something, focusing on somebody else, when in doubt, be of service, right? It's usually very simple, and it's always what's right in front of me, and so when I get active doing that, right, So it's like I ask God to remove it. I ask him what he'd have me be. I kind of get an idea what that is. And then I start taking action, right? The being comes before the doing, right? I have an idea of the being, and then that leads to the doing, and this is what it means to me to be living by spiritual principles rather than by selfishness. So that's the second tool. And then the third one is in the sex inventory. It's on page 69. It's just after the instructions they give us for writing the inventory. And they say, in this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. Here's the tool. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? They keep talking about selfishness here, Isn't that interesting? A little backstory here. So this was not an idea that was new to Bill. It was not new to the Big Book, right? This was an idea that came from the Oxford group, which, AA came from, and the early members were members of. And this was their way of kind of summing up the problems of the world. They were they were practicing first century Christianity, right? And they basically summarized all sin as having one root or cause, and that was selfishness. People thinking about themselves and trying to get what they wanted, and that's what leads to all of these problems, right? And this is a huge idea. Right? I tell people when I go through the steps, like, if you don't think that this is a huge idea, that this is revolutionary, that this will change the way that you see yourself and all the world, if you don't get that, like, you're not understanding it, As somebody like myself who comes into recovery and has been living selfishly and self-centeredly all their lives, dwelling on themselves. And for me, I was a nice guy. I grew up in a religious household. I had a loving family. My parents have been married 40 some years, like stable as it gets, pretty much. And I was, part of my strategy, my selfish strategy, was to be really kind, on the surface, outwardly, like, oh yeah, Barry, I'm attentive. I'm thinking about others. But it was always with this motive to get people to treat me the way that I wanted to. I had immense fear because I was completely obsessed with myself all the time, right? And that was what was motivating my behavior, which is completely selfish, and it completely blocks you from God, And so, like it says, is he not a self-seeker even when trying to be kind, right? And basically, whatever strategy I think is going to work to get my way, that's what I'm going to use, whether that's being demanding or gracious. I can be self-sacrificial. I'm kind, or I can be, angry and yelling and raging and all that. But the motive, right? The motive is really what matters. So again, these three inventories, these three tools, these are extremely powerful. In my experience, they work, right? Again, the stuff that's in this book is in here because it works. I'll go back a little bit. I got a few more minutes here. So in the fear inventory, this is another area where I think that we can get kind of hung up. So again, I said, fear is one of the biggest problems we have, and it has the most simple solution, right? And effectively, that solution is to take my attention off of my fear, off of these thoughts that have popped into my head about some future event that is terrible, right? Some fantasy. Take my attention and focus off of that and put it on God instead, right? That's basically what I'm doing when I'm praying this prayer and asking God what he'd have me be and do and all that. And so it's very simple. It's just that it feels like turning your back on a charging grizzly bear. It's like, no, there's a bear charging at me. It's like, well, is the bear real? Is he in the room with you? When we go through the fear inventory, I usually ask people when they finish, like, okay, so how much of that is happening right now? And, they'll kind of sit there, well, none of it. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So it sounds like God's taking care of you really well right now. And maybe if you just stay where you are, you'll be fine. And that's the reality. If I stay where I am and deal with reality instead of trying to fix these fantasies in my head, I'm always okay. I've lived through everything I've experienced so far. It's like, it's not always comfortable. It's not always easy, but hey, here I am. and I can learn and grow and all that. So one of the ways that I suggest people go through the fear inventory, because of my understanding and my, what I know to be the goal here, is I don't have people inventory fear, right? Just write the list down, right? Just write a list of your fears. And then let's talk about the solution. Hey, what do we do? And let's start doing that, right? Writing these inventories, talking about this, hearing me share this stuff on the meeting, this will do nothing for you. Absolutely nothing. Doesn't help anybody, right? The only thing that makes a damn bit of difference for me in my life and what my experience of life is what I do in the moment when I experience selfishness. That's the only thing that makes any difference. Actually starting to rely on God, actually starting to practice these things. And so that's what I always try to emphasize with people. It's like, this is not about writing stuff down. It's not about like, these inventories are great, but the purpose is to get me to a place where I'm practicing these things. I'm trying to live reliant on God, right? That's what actually brings the freedom. That brings the different experience, and so that's what I want to focus on. And there's kind of a basis for that on top of 68. They say, we asked ourselves why we had them, why we have these fears. And then they answer the question for us. It's not a question we need to answer. They say, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Right? Relying on me, trying to arrange life to suit myself, playing God, it doesn't work, right? They've already convinced us of that. And so I need something more than that, something more, substantial. Relying on me, it just doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work. And so, like it says later on the page, really the solution is playing the role that God has assigned me, living out that step 3 decision. And then as it says in the next line, doing what I think God would have me and humbly relying on him in the process. And this is really just, to me, it's just practicing that fear tool, in the moment when I'm afraid. Relying on me would be thinking about it, would be dwelling on it, would be focusing on it. How do I fix this thing? It's like if you ever driven through the desert, like in Nevada or something, and these long, straight stretches, right? And you can look miles and miles ahead and you're like, oh my God, is that water on the road? Do you see water up there? And like, yeah, it looks like water. And, because you and I are fairly intelligent, we can know, well, there's no water out there. There's no water on the road, right? It's just the heat waves and, how the light travels through whatever. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but it looks like there's water. But we know that there's not water. And it's exactly the same thing with fear, right? It's not real. It doesn't exist. It's not happening right now, right? I am fantasizing about this. I am making it up, right? Yeah, I get that it's based on things that are actually happening, reality, right? But there is no substance to it. And my fantasies, and I think you'll find this is true also, if you think about it, my fantasies, my fears, when I'm thinking about the future, this terrible event that may happen, God is never a part of that, right? I am not imagining God in that scenario, right? And this is self-reliance. I am imagining a world in which God does not exist. I am forgetting the most important fact about this moment, which is that God is present. And that is what it is to live in hell, right? When I start living as though God does not exist, I immediately am transported into hell. It is terrible. It is awful, right? I am suffering. And so the solution, again, is very simple. Very simple. It is to get focused back on God, the role that I've been assigned, who can I help, being of service, and doing that in this moment. So I think I'll stop there. I covered a lot. Yeah, curious to see if there's any questions or whatnot. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciated this. And a couple of months ago, I had this insight that I thought was revolutionary, but sounds like it wasn't, because you've had the same thought pretty much. I was reviewing step 10 and, it says, watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when they crop up, we ask God once to remove them. Anyways, but as I was going into that, I was like, well, let me look at the root of this. Selfishness, well, that's selfishness. Dishonesty, Well, that's me trying to protect myself from whatever harm may come if I tell the truth about it. That's selfish. Resentment, well, in the end, I'm just upset that somebody isn't doing things that I want them to do. That's selfishness. And fear is selfishness. I'm not trusting that, God has me and it's all about me. And so, I thought that was revolutionary. Apparently not. So talk to me a little bit more about that selfishness, and you just spent some time doing that, but is there anything else that I'm missing as I go through that? Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Rico 12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of the keys that has unlocked the steps to me, and it's really simplified it. It's made things so clear, right? I can carry a really clear, simple message to people because of this understanding. And it also has the benefit of, I believe, being true and being exactly what the book says, and so there's a lot of things that really make it a winning combination. But I really, for me, it comes back to my own personal experience, like I'm passionate about this. I believe it because I have lived it and I have experienced it, and I know that it works, and I've seen other people catch hold of it and seen it transform their lives as well, and so it really, it's a simplifying of things, and even what you're describing with step 10, continue to watch for these things as they crop up. And when I go through that with people, it's like these aren't new or different things. It's the same stuff we've talked about before. It's the same stuff we inventoried, and it's all just selfishness, right? He's just using different words to describe selfishness, which is one of the hallmarks of Bill. His writings, constantly, he's using different words. We got grosser handicaps, shortcomings, defects, he's always using different words to say the same thing. And it's the same deal with the resentments and the fear, dishonesty. It's just different words for the same thing, the same root, the same cause. And so realizing that really makes things a lot simpler, a lot more straightforward for me. I tell people, like it says in the 12 and 12, anytime I'm disturbed, there's something wrong in me. All right, I'm disturbed. Okay, what's the problem? I got to think about it. I got to figure it out. I got to write an inventory. It's like, no, you don't. It's selfishness. You're thinking about yourself and trying to make it happen, trying to get what you want, right? That's the problem. So what's the solution? Well, then it becomes very simple, right? I need to get focused on God, God's will, God's way, surrender my right to play God, and try to hold on to outcomes, right? When I give that up and then I start trying to work for God again, I'm free, right? I am free. There's nothing to solve. There's nothing to figure out, right? It is so simple. Yeah, a kindergartner can understand this, It's like, I don't need worksheets. I don't need this, a PhD. It's like, no, it's really, really simple. Stop thinking about yourself and what you want and start focusing on God and being a channel for God, customer service agent for God, thinking about others, trying to help, be of service, right? I think the big issue is, in order to do this, we have to give up our fears, right? We have to let God be our director instead of our fears, right? And this is the dying, the dying to self, right? That the 11th step prayer talks about. I have to die to self to be reborn, in order to be rocketed into the fourth dimension. I can't take this selfishness with me. This rocket, it just doesn't work. And so this is, I think, part of the reason why a lot of people don't do it. They don't experience it because the price is very high. A price has to be paid. And it means that I have to give up putting myself in the center of the world. I have to give up being the center of everything and start making God and others really the center of my focus and attention in life. But the cool thing is that it actually works. It leads to freedom, leads to joy, love, harmony, connection, all the things that I think we all really want. We're just confused about how to get it, So
yeah. No, that's powerful. Thank you for going into that, Luke. Appreciate it. And a reminder to our live audience, if you have a question for Luke, type it in the chat. If you'd like to remain anonymous and not have me read your first name, either direct message me or say anonymous, please, and I won't read your first name. Question that came in and asked if you could follow up and repeat the first tool on resentments. We've got the 3 tools that you talked about for each of the 3 inventories. What was that first tool again, Luke?
Yeah, so the first tool is on page 66, bottom of the page. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. So that's just saying, hey, you need to realize, you need to make real in your experience with the people who have wronged you, the people who have hurt you, the people who have mistreated you, the people that you resent, your enemies. You got to realize, really realize, get it on the inside that these people are living on pages 60 to 62. Right? They are selfish and self-centered. They are playing God. They are thinking about themselves. They are trying to arrange life to suit themselves. They're the actor who's trying to be the director, right? Arrange everything so that they can be happy, right? And they say, hey, we don't like their symptoms and how they affect us. Yeah, it sucks. People can cause a lot of harm. They can be absolutely terrible. But when I get to understanding the motive, that it's not personal, that they are suffering in this bondage of self, they're victims of this delusion that they'll be happy if they get what they want. When I see that and I connect it with my own experience that, hey, man, I've caused a lot of harm. I've done a lot of shit that I did not want to do, that, I wasn't cool with, that was against my values. Well, why did I do that? Why did I do that? That was the best that I could do, right? That was the best that I could do in that moment. And I think accepting that is really the key to becoming open to seeking spiritual help. That's a key to step 1. And it's really the key to setting myself free from the behavior of others. All of a sudden I can begin to have compassion and empathy and understanding. It's like these people are hurting, they're suffering, they're afraid, right? That's not personal. That has nothing to do with me, right? And so seeing this, coming to this new perspective, getting this new understanding, to me, that is what it means to master resentment. To get the upper hand on resentment. It doesn't have to be in charge of me anymore. And when these events come up, when people harm me in the future, which they will, right? That is a guarantee. You will be harmed. People will wrong you. Like, how are you going to respond to that? What are you going to do? You're going to get pissed off, block from God, go relapse? Okay, well, that's one option, right? But we need something different. We need a solution, a durable solution with depth and weight, right? And that's what we got here, right? That's what that tool is.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that just a little bit more here because, for me, for others in this room and others listening, maybe they've been living in pages 60 to 62 for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years or more. And that voice of self is their voice of reason that they've understood. Hey, this voice is helping protect me from those people that are out there hurting me. How does that perception and perspective change from I'm protecting myself from that jerk who's done nothing but hurt me to, that person's probably spiritually sick just like me, and I'm not going to take it personally. What's that process look like for you?
Yeah, it says very clearly on the top of 66, to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got, right? And it says, the world and its people are often quite wrong. People are going to be wrong. People are going to cause harm. This is going to happen. And so to me, the the tool here that they give us, the solution, the way to master resentment, really takes the ground glass out of the experience. It takes the ground glass out of me. You think about glass, you shatter a window, you break it up into pieces, and then you shove it in your insides, right? It's like it just cuts everything. It destroys you. It's absolutely brutal, right? You think about that. And that's exactly what we're doing when we're resenting people. I am just grinding up my insides. It is absolute hell. And so one of the things that I will ask people is just, well, what has your experience been like, right? What is the result, And, it can be really eye-opening to people. Like, we've been living a certain way for often decades, right? And it can be very delusional, very delusional. Like, and that's what the book says. This is a delusional idea. And so we really have to look at the facts, right? What are the facts, right? The facts are somebody that comes to this program, they can't stay sober, right? They're usually very miserable, unhappy, right? Depressed, afraid, and trying to get our way. I think pretty clearly, if somebody's honest, always leads to this terrible experience that the book describes. And so I think bringing people's attention to what is actually happening, the experience that they're actually having, rather than how they think it should work, this idea that, oh man, yeah, if they treated me right, man, it would be so good, like if they behaved a certain way, oh, that would be great. Life would be so wonderful. And then just focusing on that and trying to make it happen. But actually, when you've lived that way, what has the result been? And the result is suffering, for me right now. And so I think as much as I can, just trying to bring people in touch with reality, it's like, what are the results? What is actually happening? What is your experience actually like? And I think the cool thing with this is that I really believe this is fundamental. This is foundational. Like, everybody has this experience, and so everybody can relate to it if they're willing and open to it. These ideas are universal, and they're irrespective of religion or background or culture or anything. They are human, right? Any human being will have this experience, and so it gives me really a solid foundation that I can talk and discuss these topics with people.
I love that. Let's go a little bit into willingness here. Anastasia, who's a live attendee here in this meeting, has a question for you. What's your experience with willingness, or rather lack thereof? Sometimes I pray for others, but truth be told, I don't want to pray for them. I want to be relieved of my selfishness in all its manifestations, but there is so much resistance. I know the big book says pray for willingness, but I was wondering whether you can share your experience with it. Hey Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss Rico 12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to Rico 12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, it's a great topic. The way that the big book is laid out, they're constantly saying that they're trying to convince us of things, right? And these ideas that they're trying to convince us of build on each other as we go through the steps, right? So if you're not convinced of your hopelessness in step 1, they basically say, read it again or throw it out. Just give up. Like, this ain't going to do anything for you if you're not convinced of your hopelessness, that you have a disease that you can't fix on your own and no human power can fix it. They're like, don't even bother, man. Don't even bother. And again, that's based on their experience, right? That's based on their experience. And so when we get to step 3, they say the same thing. The first requirement here is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And then they go on and they try to convince us of this idea by sharing their experience and explaining what it looks like when we live that way, right? And I think that if somebody's struggling with this, I think to some extent they haven't become convinced of what they're saying on those pages, 60 to 62, that selfishness is going to work, right? That when I'm disturbed, it's somebody else's fault, right? That's really what we're saying, right? If you would just behave yourself, I would be okay. And you can see what a fragile way that is to approach life. You know, it is not a way to approach life that is durable, that will work in all circumstances. And that's what they're offering us here, a way of living that is really durable, that really works regardless of what anybody does at any time. And that's pretty cool. You know, that is really cool. But we do have to be convinced that when we are disturbed, the problem is in me, you know, and that is a really hard sell, you know, that is a really hard sell. People don't like that, right? Because we've been programmed our whole lives, and, you know, culture, society, our families, pretty much everybody is telling us the opposite all the time, right? Like living by spiritual principles is not easy to hang on to because everything is telling us the opposite. When I go to work, they're telling me the opposite. When I'm at home, my family's telling me the opposite, you know? And so holding on to this is, you know, I think it takes a fellowship. I think it takes really a lot of work, a lot of rituals, you know, to remind myself, reading literature. But the results speak for themselves, you know, the freedom, the peace, the serenity, the experience that I have. And that's why I know that it is true, right? When I know the truth, it sets me free. And so if I'm getting freedom, I know I'm onto the truth. And but willingness, you know, willingness is really, to me, if I'm really struggling with something, I just try to bring God into it more. You know, I've just found over the years that I don't just, you know, God help, you know, bring me to a new understanding, help me see where I'm going wrong. What is up here? You know, trying to just open myself up to whatever experience I need to have so that I can move forward and get some freedom, you know, and I do that by just asking God for help. You know, what am I missing here, God? Who do I need to talk to get a better understanding about this? What do I need to do to have a new experience with this stuff? You know, we pray the set aside prayer at the beginning of this because what we found over the years is that, you know, when we've been around a while, we get some ideas about how things work, and those may or may not be true, you know. And so being open to new ideas, being open to things that work for other people is very important, right? This is part of humility, you know. And so I need to be in that kind of state, in that kind of place, not playing God, just seeking, questioning, you know, and trying to move toward that experience of freedom and connection that the book describes.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. As you were sharing that, I had a question come up that I may be kicking a hornet's nest here, but I want to ask this question because you said, you know, this works in any situation, no matter what's going on around me. You know, I hear so much, you know, you triggered me or that triggered me, or, you know, I came across a trigger that really blew me up today. Talk to me about your take on this, on these tools and this practice and the thought of these triggering experiences that we have.
Yeah. Well, what I've been taught is that that's just God asking for my attention. You know, I mean, when I'm triggered, I mean, it never fails. I'm thinking about myself. You know, it's like I'm not focusing on God. I'm not focusing on God's will. You know, it's like I'm thinking about the experience that I believe I should be having and how I'm not having it, and I'm getting disturbed. I'm getting upset. You know, and so to me, all the disturbances that I experience on a daily basis, which, you know, they're frequent. You know, I get disturbed, same as anybody else. It's gotten less, of course, but they're just, you know, God asking for my attention. And really, again, I try to keep everything really simple, stupidly simple. And so to me, most of my spiritual practice today is just focusing on God consciously as much as possible. So if I'm getting triggered by something, it's like, okay, I'm disturbed. right? Another way to describe being triggered is being disturbed, right? And what is that? Well, that's selfishness. That means that I'm thinking about me, focusing on me again. So what is the solution? Not focusing on me, right? What do I focus on instead? Oh, God, service. And again, it's just the same thing over and over and over. Different clothes, different situation, different person, different circumstances. But to me, I heard a guy say this once, and I loved it so much because I think it's been my experience that really, no matter what somebody asks, no matter what question there is, no matter what the problem is, the answer is always God, right? So God is the answer. What was your question?
Love it. Love that. Man, I'm getting a lot here that is I'm putting the mirror back and seeing myself in a lot of these things that you're sharing, and I'm grateful for that. Sometimes I don't appreciate that look in the mirror, but for whatever reason, this is hitting me in a different way that I'm appreciating it. So maybe I'm not quite as selfish as I thought I was, at least in this moment. But anyways, I have another question here. This one's from Eli from our live audience. And he says, this question just kind of came to mind. So it sounds like step 4 gives us so much. What do you see that the remaining steps give us that we don't find here in the instructions? And maybe how does step 4 lead into that? Does that make sense to you? And do you have any thoughts on that? Hey, Rico 12 Spearheads. If our recovery resources have helped you, please consider a donation. Your financial support, as well as your word of mouth support, keeps Rico 12 running and reaching the man who is still sick. Donate today at rico12.com/support or check the show notes for PayPal and Venmo links. Every contribution helps carry the message. Thanks for being a Rico 12 Spearhead.
Yeah. So step 4 is just identifying selfishness, right? I'm just if to use the inventory at a store, that metaphor that they use in the book. I'm just looking at the shelves and I'm finding the stuff that's expired, that's gone bad, the things that are, I've taken them off the shelf and I'm putting them in the garbage, right? That's all I'm doing in step 4, right? And then step 5, hey, I'm saying, hey, this is all the garbage I got. This is all the stuff, and that kind of makes it more real. We can kind of accept it and see it more clearly when we do that with somebody else. And then, but if that's all we did, there would be no freedom, right? Just looking at my own selfishness doesn't actually make me free, right? Because I still got it. There seems to be no way of entirely getting rid of self without God's aid, right? So just seeing it is not enough, right? I got to move on. Hey, I can't get rid of this on my own, right? All this stuff that I inventoried in step 4, if I don't have a God, I'm going to do it all again. I'm going to do it all again. And this is one of the realities that I think makes it, if you don't get this, then you probably still have a lot of trouble with shame, right? You still beat yourself up. Oh my God, why did I do that? What's wrong with me? How do I, I could have done differently. I could have done it better, right? It's like, well, why didn't you, why didn't you do better, Sparky? And it's like, oh, I can't get rid of self on my own. I need some more steps. I need step 6. Hey, there's a God that can do this. I need step 7. Hey, ask him, ask God to remove this stuff. And so, that's the continuation. And, Bill says, I think in the 12 and 12, it's just sort of an odd thing, but I think it makes sense to me where I know where he's coming from, that, step 6 and 7 separate the men from the boys or the girls from the women, and it's like, well, what does that mean? And really it's just living out step 3. It's actually making God my director. It's actually becoming reliant and dependent upon God. It's actually accepting that I cannot remove selfishness on my own. I need to be dependent on God. I need to be practicing these steps and living this way. And that reliance is what leads to a day-to-day experience of freedom and harmony and joy and peace and serenity. And so these are very necessary, right? Very necessary. And then 8 and 9, really step 9, there's this idea that the harms that I cause when I'm living selfishly, they block me from God as well. If they are not addressed, they will stand in the way of my relationship with God. And so I need to address these things so that I can have a clear channel, so that I can have a clear, clean relationship with God that's not blocked off, right? And a lot of people experience profound, profound awakenings when they make amends. Like, it's probably one of the strongest medicines that we have in this program, right? Making amends it's very powerful. And it has an amazing healing power in relationships. Frequently, people find that, relationships get transformed like instantaneously. Really amazing stuff. So this is all necessary as well, right? And then 10 through 12, we're living these earlier steps. We're really continuing this process. Step 10 is kind of like steps 4 through 9 in one step, right? So we're identifying selfishness, asking God to remove it, and we're making amends when we cause harm. That's 4 through 9. And then step 11, we're nourishing this connection, this relationship that we've discovered as we've poured out selfishness, right? And then in step 12, we're really practicing letting it flow, and what I found is that really there has to be a place for this this kind of connection, this relationship with God, the love to flow. And if there isn't a place for it to flow, then it stagnates, and I don't feel so good. I get some spiritual constipation, like I start getting a little depressed, a little miserable, I start getting a little more irritated, and it's a result of my holding on to this love, or blocking off this love inside of me that is trying to come out and be expressed. And so step 12 gives me a way to do that and practice it very effectively and consistently. So
yeah,
that's a little bit.
No, good. Thank you. All right, I have another statement, and then we'll do a close-up question here in just a second. Statement from Haley, who's in our live audience, and I think her statement here is something that a lot of people have experienced and seen. She says, "I'd just like to say a huge thank you, Luke, for shining such a bright light on step 4 for me. I walked away from fellowship towards the end of step 4 for nearly a year. Just recently came back, and divine timing brought me on here tonight." So, I think a lot of people step away from fellowship while doing step 4 because of fear, because of, I don't want to look at these things. Why do I need to do that? But a lot of times people come back after going, well, something's not working. Tell me a little, address that statement and your experience with that, Luke.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And to me, this is one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this, because I think we get twisted messages, if people hear in step 4, where were you at fault? What's your part in this abuse that you suffered, that you're so pissed off about? It's like, what the hell do you mean? What's my part? I was a victim. I was 5 years old. They abused me. This isn't right. I can't, and it just reopens this old wound. And we're like, this doesn't work. What the heck's the problem? And the issue to me really is the foundational understanding that comes in step 3, right? We have to understand, we have to become convinced of these ideas before we can come into the inventory process and have it actually be effective. And we got to understand what we're doing. Why are we doing this? What is the reason? What's the focus? What's the purpose? What's the point? And I think when we get that and we understand it, we can begin to see that it's not about taking blame and owning things that are not ours. The book says people wrong us, people, the world and its people are often quite wrong. We get it. I get it. That's not what we're saying here, right? We're saying that the selfishness, this way of approaching life, this game plan for living, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't lead to the experience that we're desiring, and so waking up to that is really the beginning of getting freedom from that, and so I think trying to go through those pages and explain them, share my experience with them as clearly as possible, is really, really fundamental to the fourth step and the experience that people have with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke. Do you have any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Just get out of self. Go help somebody.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Luke, for an amazing Rico 12 speaker meeting. If you missed this or you want to revisit this conversation, it will be live up on every podcast platform today, which is Friday, February 27th, and it'll be there forever and ever and ever. So if you just go follow Rico 12 speaker meeting podcasts on any podcast platform, you can listen to this or any of the previous 400 plus meetings we've done. If you haven't yet considered rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please consider doing that. It's a great way to share these messages with others as it makes this recording more visible. Come back next week as we continue our 12-week series on step 5. I'm excited to have a wonderful speaker share their experience, strength, and hope, and stay updated on our WhatsApp group and email list. If you're not there, you can send an email at rico12pod@gmail.com. Now, Luke will launch us out of here with a third step prayer.
All right, we'll take another moment of silence for those suffering in and out of these rooms, and I'll take us out with the third step prayer. Third step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Thank you, Luke. Remember, everybody, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back, and when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
It ain't about the body, it ain't about the skin. It's the lie that whisper you'll be whole if you give in. It's the high before the hollow, the click before the fall. It's the ache that never satisfies no matter what you saw. They told me it was natural, just boys being boys, but I was choking down poison dressed up like a choice, and now I'm calling it by name. No more hiding in the fog. It ain't just porn I'm fighting, it's the God I made of want. Porn of problem, lust is the thief, selling us heaven and leaving us grief. I wanted to love, but I learned how to crave. Now I'm digging through ashes and calling it brave. She ain't an object and I ain't a king. Porn is the problem, not just a thing. And what about her? Yeah, the other side. The girl who learned early she was worth what she supplied. She didn't want to be seen, she wanted to be wanted. Now she's starved for attention and Instagram haunted. It's the hunger to be lusted, mistaken for love. And both sides end up empty, beneath and above. Two mirrors cracked, reflecting shame, chasing validation instead of names. Porn is the problem, it sells a fake cure, turns humans to products, makes touch feel impure. We thought we were free, but we're slaves in disguise, scrolling through bodies with dead in our eyes. This ain't just a screen, it's a spiritual war. Porn is the problem, and we can't ignore. I want more than a moan behind a glassy screen. I want covenant, not dopamine. She ain't here for my escape. She's the temple, not the bait. Porn is the problem, but truth is the light. I'm learning to see her with heaven in sight. I'm laying down idols, I'm turning from shame. And love don't come cheap, it comes with a name. I ain't been cured, but I'm done with the game. Porn is the problem, and I'm not the same. I used to worship lust. Now I'm learning how to love.